Hi everybody, my name is Gert and in this video I'm going to show you how to make a really cool, easy and cheap, as it's made out of trash, generator for your kill team, 40k, whatever sci-fi game you might prefer. Now before we get started, first of all, thank you all very much, 1,000 subscribers, fantastic. Please keep and help me grow this channel, keep liking, subscribing, give me a comment, you know what to do. Welcome to the workshop. So the generator was built up with the plastic container from bubblegum, then a couple of pieces from a controller of a plastic toy crane and the lens of an old video camera. Let's take a look at the construction. We are going to start by cleaning up the plastic wrapper, cut off all the plastic that you won't be needing and get rid of all the little labels that are printed on by just scraping your knife. Be careful during this process so you do not cut yourself. With a screwdriver I got the controller apart. I'm going to use several pieces of the handle. I just used my hobby saw. This went quite easily. And then with a little bit of super glue I attach all the pieces together. Try to get them somewhat in the center. Base was cut from 5mm thick foam board. Now the generator needs some sort of engine piece. Now while pulling apart the controller I noticed this, which I thought looked really nice to use. Remember to clean up any flesh. Then I needed a tube-like object to go in between like this. However, I was not happy with this result, so I ripped out my electronic stuff that I kept throughout the years. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, in this hobby, do not throw anything away. When trying to gather hobby materials to use in projects, do not just do it by yourself. Ask your friends, ask your family to keep this stuff apart. Most families will have an attic containing large boxes with polystyrene that they are too lazy to get rid of. Well, all that stuff is yours. You just have to ask. Do not be afraid. Do not be ashamed of what you are going to do with it. This is a fantastic hobby and I can recommend it to everybody. Other sources that you can use. Maybe you have a container at work where they keep broken electronic equipment, old video cameras, old game consoles. Please be careful with TVs and the large capacitors. The loads that are on there can kill you. If you don't know what you're doing, do not touch that kind of stuff. I'm talking small electronics, toys, whatever. Now let's continue with the project. So after putting a couple pieces aside which I thought could be useful in the future, I found this lens. And this lens worked perfectly with the piece that I got from the controller and with the view that I have in my head. So I experiment a little bit more with placement of some of the pieces until I'm happy with the results. I cut off a piece of cardboard to which I'm going to use super glue to attach all the pieces. Now I want to build up the engine shape a little bit more, so I cut off a couple of squares from 5mm foam board. With a little bit of cardboard to the sides so that it cleans up nicely. This is a cap from a drinking bottle from my kids. I decided to have some kind of ventilation system for the engine. Now that the basic construction is done, it's time to lay down a bunch of detailing. First detail is an Imperial Eagle which I cast with UV resin. Really fast, really handy. In the previous video I showed you how to make a mold out of the blue stuff. Casting is really easy. Pour in the stuff, use a UV light for about a minute, pull out the casting and you can simply glue it on with a bit of super glue. Time for a bunch of more detailing. For this I use cardboard strips about 3mm thick. No, about 3mm wide. It's less than 1mm thick. And just glue it onto the appropriate places. Then of course rivets. This is the grimdark. After all, we need rivets. 2mm thick styrene rods. And just with your hobby knife you can cut off a bunch and apply these with a little bit of super glue. This is quite time consuming work, however it adds a ton of character, I find. It looks really nice when painted up, and it has a little bit of a relaxing quality, adding a bunch of rivets. Time for the next step. I'm going to add some granny grating to the ventilation shaft. Simply cut it out with a hobby knife and then glue it with a little bit of super glue. For the piping I went with 1.5mm thick floral wire because this is very easy to bend into shape with a pair of pliers. And it's also very easy to cut. Couple of things that I didn't talk about in the video itself, but I'm going to talk about it right now. Sewing snap fasteners. I simply glued these onto the plastic and I painted them up. And then another detailing thing that I used, sprues. You will have sections on the sprue, when cut off, cleaned up a little bit, are perfectly usable to apply to your models. Again, cheap trash. Do not throw away your sprues, they can be useful. Let's continue with the video. Another piece of detailing that I used on this project are little capacitors. These also come from old clock radios, cameras, what have you. Now these contain dangerous liquids, so please use enough super glue so you close everything up. And this is the result. I also added a couple of broken up LEDs. A piece of drinking straw. So after the building stage it's time to lay down a bunch of painting. We are going to start with a first coat of black primer. For this I used a spray paint can to ensure I have a good bond with all the plastic pieces in this project. Then a couple of base coats, lead belcher on all the metal parts, and brown to where I'm going to lay down the brass color, which you can see me do here. I use a brown base color because this helps with the yellow in the brass. Time for a bunch of washes. First up, Ajax Earthshade over all the brass, into all the nooks and crannies. Then I add a little bit of Vallejo smoke to the Earthshade. This is going to make it a little bit more darker, a bit more dirtier. The smoke is really handy to simulate engine effects and oil grease. So I use the same mixture on the exhaust. And I use it to detail the side of the vent as well. A bit of a streaking effect using the same paint mixture. Then it's time for a bit of black wash. I use this on all the metal parts to paint in a little bit of definition, a little bit of separation between the parts. And of course all over the engine section. This is going to add depth and shadows for when we dry brush the metal colors later. And also over the exhaust vent. Now for the concrete, I painted this in exactly the same way that I did the Imperial Outpost, the MDF wall sections that I did in a previous project. If you haven't seen this yet, go and check it out. Link in the description below. So after all that black wash, it's time for a verdigris glaze. I use a Vallejo glaze for this, and I thin it down quite a bit, and I laid down 3 layers so I could build it up gently. Third layer is this detailing with a little bit of streaking effect to some places. A bit of stippling. And then it's time to lay down a dry brush of steel all over the engine section. To give the piece a little bit more life, I added a bit more detailing, an oil can. I used the black primer to paint it black. And I also painted up the detailing, the LED lights, and the can in cavalry red. And then a bit of shading with Argrax Earthshade. Black wash this to simulate an oil spill. And then a bit of Vallejo smoke. And that is it for this project, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all very much for watching. Next week is going to be something different. Once again, we are going to make a monster for my Warcry terrain. Please check out my social media, like, subscribe, you know what to do. And I'll see you next week for a new update. Bye.